Hello, we're back. I'm an hour late. I'm sorry. It's snowing so heavily today, which is not why I'm late. I am late because my stomach's bothering me, and it was hard to get moving after a brief nap today. But here we are. It is blizzarding outside. We're expecting 12 to 20 inches of snow. I have tea, and I am ready to get started in like a minute and a half. So hang tight, and then we'll get to it. Okay, let's get down to business. Let me move my mic a little closer, maybe. Give it a little turn. All right, there we go. Off-center, 45 degrees kind of deal. Okay, a Canticle for Leibowitz, chapter 16. The old hermit stood at the edge of the mesa and watched the approach of the dust speck across the desert. The hermit munched, muttered words, and chuckled silently into the wind. His withered hide was burned the color of old leather by the sun, and his brushy beard was stained yellow about the chin. He wore a basket hat and a loincloth of rough homespun that resembled burlap, his only clothing except for sandals and a goatskin water bag. He watched the dust speck until it passed through the village of Leibowitz and departed again by way of the road leading past the mesa. "Ah!" snorted the hermit, his eyes beginning to burn. "His empire shall be multiplied, and there shall be no end of his peace. He shall sit upon his kingdom." Suddenly he went down the arroyo like a cat with 3 legs, using his staff, bounding from stone to stone and sliding most of the way. The dust from his rapid descent plumed high on the wind and wandered away. At the foot of the mesa, he vanished into the mesquite and settled down to wait. Soon he heard the rider approaching at a lazy trot, and he began slinking toward the road to peer out through the brush. The pony appeared from around the bend, wrapped in a thin dust shroud. The hermit darted into the trail and threw up his arms. "Ola ole!" he shouted, and as the rider halted, he darted forward to seize the reins and frowned anxiously up at the man in the saddle. His eyes blazed for a moment. "For a child is born to us, and a son is given us." But then the anxious frown melted away into sadness. "It's not him," he grumbled irritably at the sky. The rider had thrown back his hood and was laughing. The hermit blinked angrily at him for a moment. Recognition dawned. "Ugh," he grunted. "You? I thought you'd be dead by now. What are you doing out here?" "I brought back your prodigal, Benjamin," said Dom Paulo. He tugged at a leash, and the blue-headed goat trotted up from behind the pony. It bleated and strained at the rope upon seeing the hermit. "And I thought I'd pay you a visit." "The animal is the poet's," the hermit grunted. "He won it fairly in a game of chance, although he cheated miserably. And take it back to him, and let me counsel you against meddling in worldly swindles that don't concern you. A good day." He turned toward the arroyo. "Wait, Benjamin. Take your goat, or I'll give it to a peasant. I won't have it wandering around the abbey and bleeding into the church." "It's not a goat," the hermit said crossly. "It's the beast which your prophet saw, and it was made for a woman to ride. I suggest you curse it and drive it into the desert. You notice, however, that it divideth the hoof and cheweth the cud." He started away again. The abbot's smile faded. "Benjamin, are you really going back up that hill without even a hello for an old friend?" "Hello!" the old Jew called back, and marched indignantly on. After a few steps, he stopped to glance over his shoulder. "You needn't look so hurt," he said. "It's been 5 years since you've troubled to come this way, old friend." "Ha!" "So that's it," muttered the abbot. He dismounted and hurried after the old Jew. Benjamin, I would have come. I have not been free." The hermit stopped. "Well, Paulo, since you're here." Suddenly they laughed and embraced. "It's good, you old grump," said the hermit. "Oh, my bad, vice versa." "It's good, you old grump," said the hermit. "I, a grump?" "Well, I'm getting cranky too, I guess. The last century has been a trying one for me." "I hear you've been throwing rocks at novices who come hereabouts for their Lenten fast in the desert. Can this be true?" He eyed the hermit with mock reproof. "Only pebbles." "Miserable old pretzel." Now, Paulo, one of them once mistook me for a distant relative of mine, name of Leibowitz. He thought I had been sent to deliver him a message, or some of your other scalawags thought so. I don't want it to happen again, so I throw pebbles at them sometimes. Ha ha! I'll not be mistaken for that kinsman again, for he stopped being any kin of mine." The priest looked puzzled. "Mistook you for whom? St. Leibowitz? And now, Benjamin, you're going too far." Benjamin repeated it in a mocking sing-song. "Mistook me for a distant relative of mine, name of Leibowitz, so I throw pebbles at them." Don Paulo looked thoroughly perplexed. "St. Leibowitz has been dead a dozen centuries. How could—" He broke off and peered warily at the old hermit. "Now, Benjamin, let's don't start that tail wagging again. You haven't lived 12 centuries—" "Nonsense!" interrupted the old Jew. "I didn't say it happened 12 centuries ago. It was only 6 centuries ago, long after your saint was dead. That's why it was so preposterous. Of course, your novices were more devout in those days, and more credulous. I think Francis was that one's name. Poor fellow. I buried him later. Told them in New Rome where to dig for him. That's how you got his carcass back." The abbot gaped at the old man as they walked through the mesquite toward the waterhole, leading the horse and the goat. "Francis," he wondered. "Francis? That could be the venerable Francis Gerard of Utah, perhaps, to whom a pilgrim had once revealed the location of the old shelter in the village, so that story went. But that was before the village was there, and about 6 centuries ago, yes, and now this old gaffer is claiming to have been that pilgrim." He sometimes wondered where Benjamin had picked up enough knowledge of the abbey's history to invent such tales. From the poet, perhaps. "That was during my earlier career, of course," the old Jew went on, "and perhaps such a mistake was understandable." "Earlier career?" "Wanderer." "How do you expect me to believe such nonsense?" The poet believes me." "Undoubtedly, the poet certainly would never believe that the venerable Francis met a saint. That would be superstition. The poet would rather believe that he met you 6 centuries ago. A purely natural explanation, eh?" Benjamin chuckled wryly. Paulo watched him lower a leaky bark cup into the well, empty it into his water skin, and lower it again for more. The water was cloudy and alive with creeping uncertainties, as was the old Jew's stream of memory. Or was his memory uncertain? Playing games with us all, wondered the priest. Except for his delusion of being older than Methuselah, old Benjamin Elazar seemed sane enough, in his own wry way. "Drink," the hermit offered, extending the cup. The abbot suppressed a shudder, but accepted the cup so as not to offend. He drained the murky liquid at a gulp. "Not very particular, are you?" said Benjamin, watching him critically. "Wouldn't touch it myself." He patted the waterskin. "For the animals." The abbot gagged slightly. "You've changed," said Benjamin, still watching him. "You've grown pale as cheese and wasted." "I've been ill." "You look ill. Come up to my shack if the climb won't tire you out." "I'll be all right. I had a little trouble the other day, and our physician told me to rest. Ha! If an important guest weren't coming soon, I'd pay no attention. But he's coming, so I'm resting. It's quite tiresome." Benjamin glanced back at him with a grin as they climbed the arroyo. He waggled his grizzly head. "Riding 10 miles across the desert is resting. For me, it's rest, and I've been wanting to see you, Benjamin." "What will the villagers say?" the old Jew asked mockingly. "They'll think we've become reconciled, and that will spoil both of our reputations." "Our reputations never have amounted to much in the marketplace, have they?" "True," he admitted, but added cryptically, "for the present." "Still waiting, old Jew?" "Certainly," the hermit snapped. The abbot found the climb tiring. Twice they stopped to rest. By the time they reached the tableland, he had become dizzy and was leaning on the spindly hermit for support. A dull fire burned in his chest, warning against further exertion, but there was none of the angry clenching that had come before. A flock of the blue-headed goat mutants scattered at the approach of a stranger and fled into straggly mesquite. Oddly, the mesa seemed more verdant than the surrounding desert, although there was no visible supply of moisture. "This way, Paolo, to my mansion." The old Jew's hovel proved to be a single room, windowless and stone-walled, its rocks stacked loosely as a fence, with wide chinks through which the wind could blow. The roof was a flimsy patchwork of poles, most of them crooked, covered by a heap of brush, thatch, and goat skins. On a large flat rock, set on a short pillar beside the door, there was a sign printed in Hebrew. The size of the sign and its apparent attempt to advertise led Abbot Paulo to grin and ask, "What does it say, Benjamin? Does it attract much trade up here?" "What should it say? It says, 'Tents mended here.'" The priest snorted his disbelief. "All right, doubt me. But if you don't believe what's written there, you can't be expected to believe what's written on the other side of the sign." "Facing the wall?" "Obviously facing the wall." The pillar was set close to the threshold, so that only a few inches of clearance existed between the flat rock and the wall of the hovel. Paulo stooped low and squinted into the narrow space. It took him a while to make it out, but sure enough, there was something written on the back of the rock in smaller letters. "Do you ever turn the rock around?" "Turn it around? You think I'm crazy in times like these?" "What does it say back there?" The hermit sing-songed, refusing to answer. "But come on it, you who can't read from the backside." "There's a wall slightly in the way." "There always was, wasn't there?" The priest sighed. "All right, Benjamin, I know what it was that you were commanded to write, in the entry and on the door of your house, but only you would think of turning it face down." "Face inward," corrected the hermit, "as long as there are tents to be mended in Israel. But let's not begin teasing each other until you've rested. I'll get you some milk, and you can tell me about this visitor that's worrying you." "There's wine in my bag if you'd like some," said the abbot, falling with relief onto a mound of skins. "But I'd rather not talk about Don Taddeo." "Oh, that one." You've heard of Thontadio? Tell me, how is it you've always managed to know everything and everybody without stirring from this hill? One hears, one sees, the hermit said, cryptically. Tell me, what do you think of him? I haven't seen him, but I suppose he will be a pain. A birth pain, perhaps, but a pain. Birth pain? You really believe we're going to have a new renaissance, as some say? Stop smirking mysteriously, old Jew, and tell me your opinion. You're bound to have one. You always do. Why is your confidence so hard to get? Aren't we friends? On some grounds, but we do have our differences, you and I. What have our differences got to do with Thontadio and a renaissance we'd both like to see? Thontadio is a secular scholar and rather remote from our differences. Benjamin shrugged eloquently. Different, secular scholars, he echoed, tossing out the words like discarded apple pits. I have been called a secular scholar at various times by certain people, and sometimes I've been staked, stoned, and burned for it. Why, you never... The priest stopped, frowning sharply. That madness again. Benjamin was peering at him suspiciously, and his smile had gone cold. Now, thought the abbot, he's looking at me as if I were one of them, whatever formless them it was that drove him here to solitude. Staked, stoned, and burned, or did his I mean we, as in I, my people? Benjamin, I am Paulo. Torquemada is dead. I was born 70-odd years ago, and pretty soon I'll die. I have loved you, old man, and when you look at me, I wish you would see Paulo of Pecos and no other. Benjamin wavered for a moment. His eyes became moist. Sometimes I forget. And sometimes you forget that Benjamin is only Benjamin, and not all of Israel. Never! Snapped the hermit, eyes blazing again. For 32 centuries He stopped and closed his mouth tightly. Why? The abbot whispered, almost in awe. Why do you take the burden of a people and its past upon yourself alone? The hermit's eyes flared a brief warning, but he swallowed a throaty sound and lowered his face into his hands. You fish in dark waters. Forgive me. The burden, it was pressed upon me by others. He looked up slowly. Should I refuse to take it? The priest sucked in his breath. For a time, there was no sound in the shanty but the sound of the wind. There was a touch of divinity in this madness, Don Paulo thought. The Jewish community was thinly scattered in these times. Benjamin had perhaps outlived his children, or somehow become an outcast. Such an old Israelite might wander for years without encountering others of his people. Perhaps in his loneliness he had acquired the silent conviction that he was the last, the one, the only. And being the last, he ceased to be Benjamin, becoming, instead, Israel. And upon his heart had settled the history of 5,000 years, no longer remote, but become as the history of his own lifetime. His I was the converse of the imperial we. But I, too, am a member of a oneness, thought Don Paulo, a part of a congregation and a continuity. Mine, too, have been despised by the world, yet for me the distinction between self and nation is clear. For you, old friend, it has somehow become obscure, a burden pressed upon you by others, and you accepted it. What must it weigh? What would it weigh for me? He set his shoulders under it and tried to heave, testing the bulk of it. I am a Christian monk and priest, and I am, therefore, accountable before God for the actions and deeds of every monk and priest who has breathed and walked the earth since Christ, as well for the acts of my own." He shuddered and began shaking his head. No, it crushed the spine, this burden. It was too much for any man to bear, save Christ alone. To be cursed for a faith was burden enough. To bear the curses was possible, but then to accept the illogic behind the curses, the illogic which called one to task not only for himself, but also for every member of his race or faith, for their actions as well as one's own, to accept that too, as Benjamin was trying to do? No. And yet, Dom Paulo's own faith told him that the burden was there, had been there since Adam's time, and the burden imposed by a fiend crying in mockery, "Man!" at man, "Man!" calling each to account for the deeds of all since the beginning, a burden impressed upon every generation before the opening of the womb, the burden of the guilt of original sin. Let the fool dispute it. The same fool with great delight accepted the other inheritance, the inheritance of ancestral glory, virtue, triumph, and dignity, which rendered him courageous and noble by reason of birthright, without protesting that he personally had done nothing to earn that inheritance beyond being born of the race of man. The protest was reserved for the inherited burden, which rendered him guilty and outcast by reason of birthright, and against that verdict he strained to close his ears. The burden, indeed, was hard. His own faith told him, too, that the burden had been lifted from him by the one whose image hung from a cross above the altars, although the burden's imprint still was there. The imprint was an easier yoke compared to the full weight of the original curse. He could not bring himself to say it to the old man, since the old man already knew he believed it. Benjamin was looking for another. And the last old Hebrew sat alone on a mountain and did penance for Israel and waited for a Messiah and waited, and God bless you for a brave fool, even a wise fool. Wise fool, mimicked the hermit, but you always did specialize in paradox and mystery, didn't you, Paulo? If a thing can't be in contradiction to itself, then it doesn't even interest you, does it? You have to find threeness in unity, life in death, wisdom in folly. Otherwise, it might make too much common sense. To sense the responsibility is wisdom, Benjamin. To think you can carry it alone is folly. Not madness. A little, perhaps, but a brave madness. Then I'll tell you a small secret. I've known all along that I can't carry it, ever since he called me forth again. But are we talking about the same thing? The priest shrugged. You would call it the burden of being chosen. I would call it the burden of original guilt. In either case, the implied responsibility is the same, although we might tell different versions of it and disagree violently in words about what we mean in words by something that isn't really meant in words at all, since it's something that's meant in the dead silence of a heart. Benjamin chuckled. Well, I'm glad to hear you admit it, finally, even if all of you say... I'm sorry, let me try this again. Benjamin chuckled. Well, I'm glad to hear you admit it, finally, even if all you say is that you've never really said anything. Stop cackling, you reprobate. But you've always used words so wordily in crafty defense of your Trinity, although he never needed such defense before you got him from me as a unity, eh? The priest reddened, but said nothing. There! Benjamin yelped, bouncing up and down. I made you want to argue for once. Ha ha ha! But never mind. I use quite a few words myself, but I'm never quite sure he and I mean the same thing either. I suppose you can't be blamed. It must be more confusing with 3 than with 1. Blasphemous old cactus! I really wanted your opinion of Thontadio and whatever he's brewing." "Why seek the opinion of a poor old anchorite?" "Because, Benjamin Eleazar Bar Joshua, if all these years of waiting for one who isn't coming haven't taught you wisdom, at least they've made you shrewd." The old Jew closed his eyes, lifted his face ceilingward, and smiled cunningly. "Insult me," he said in mocking tones. "Rail at me, bait me, persecute me. But do you know what I'll say?" "Yes, you'll say, 'No, I'll say, 'He's already here. I caught a glimpse of him once.'" "What? Who are you talking about? Thontadio?" "No, no. Moreover, I do not care to prophesy, unless you tell me what's really bothering you, Paulo." "Well, it all started with Brother Cornhore's lamp." "Lamp? Oh yes, the poet mentioned it. He prophesied it wouldn't work." "The poet was wrong, as usual, so they tell me. I didn't watch the trial." "It worked then! Splendid! And that started what?" "Me wondering, how close are we to the brink of something? How close to a shore? Electrical essences in the basement. Do you realize how much things have changed in the past 2 centuries? Got a small page break here, which is great because I could use some tea. Okay. Soon the priest spoke at length of his fears, while the hermit, mender of tents, listened patiently until the sun had begun to leak through the chinks in the west wall to paint glowing shafts in the dusty air. "Since the death of the last civilization, the memorabilia has been our special province, Benjamin, and we've kept it. But now I sense the predicament of the shoemaker who tries to sell shoes in a village of shoemakers." The hermit smiled. "It could be done if he manufactures a special and superior type of shoe." "I'm afraid the secular scholars are already beginning to lay claim to such a method." "Then go out of the shoemaking business before you are ruined." "A possibility," the abbot admitted. "It's unpleasant to think of it, however. For 12 centuries we've been one little island in a very dark ocean. Keeping the memorabilia has been a thankless task, but a hallowed one, we think. It's our only worldly job, but we've always been bookleggers and memorizers, and it's hard to think that the job's soon to be finished, soon to become unnecessary. I can't believe that somehow." "So you try to best other shoemakers by building strange contraptions in your basement?" "I must admit, it looks that way." "What will you do next to keep ahead of the seculars? Build a flying machine, or revive the machina analytica, or perhaps step over their heads and resort to metaphysics?" "You shame me, old Jew. You know we are monks of Christ first, and such things are for others to do." "I wasn't shaming you. I see nothing inconsistent in monks of Christ building a flying machine, although it would be more like them to build a praying machine." "Wretch! I do my order a disservice by sharing a confidence with you." Benjamin smirked. "I have no sympathy for you. The books you stored away may be hoary with age, but they were written by children of the world, and they'll be taken from you by children of the world, and you had no business meddling with them in the first place." "Oh, now you care to prophesy." "Not at all. Soon the sun will set. Is that a prophecy? No, it's merely an assertion of faith in the consistency of events. The children of the world are consistent too. So I say they will soak up everything you can offer, take your job away from you, and then denounce you as a decrepit wreck. Finally, they'll ignore you entirely. It's your own fault. The book I gave you should have been enough for you. Now you'll just have to take the consequences for your meddling." He had spoken flippantly, but his prediction seemed uncomfortably close to Don Paulo's fears. The priest's countenance saddened. "Pay me no mind," said the hermit. "I'll not venture to soothsay before I've seen this contraption of yours, or taken a look at this Thontadio, who begins to interest me, by the way. Wait until I've examined the entrails of the new era in better detail, if you expect any advice from me." "Well, you won't see the lamp because you never come to the abbey." "It's your abominable cooking that I object to." "And you won't see Thontario because he comes from the other direction. If you wait to examine the entrails of an era after it's been born, until after it's been born, it's too late to prophesy its birth." "Nonsense! Probing the womb of the future is bad for the child. I shall wait, and then I shall prophesy that it was born and that it wasn't what I'm waiting for." "What a cheerful outlook! So what are you looking for?" "Someone who shouted at me once." "Shouted? Come forth!" "What rot!" To tell you the truth, I don't much expect him to come, but I was told to wait, and," he shrugged, "I wait." After a moment, his twinkling eyes narrowed to slits, and he leaned forward with sudden eagerness. "Paulo, bring this Thontario past the foot of the mesa." The abbot recoiled in mock horror. "Accoster of pilgrims, molester of novices, I shall send you the poet Sarah, and may he descend upon you and rest forever. Bring the Thon past your lair. What an outrage!" Benjamin shrugged again. "Very well, forget that I asked it. But let's hope this Thon will be on our side, and not with the others this time." "Others, Benjamin?" "Manasseh, Cyrus, Nebuchadnezzar, Pharaoh, Caesar, Hannigan the Second. Need I go on? Samuel warned us against them, then gave us one. When they have a few wise men shackled nearby to counsel them, they become more dangerous than ever. That's all the advice I'll give you now." "Well, Benjamin, I've had enough of you now to last me another 5 years, so—" "Insult me, rail at me, bait me, oh—" "Stop it! I'm leaving, old man. It's late." "So? And how is the ecclesiastical belly fixed for the ride?" "My stomach?" Don Paulo paused to explore, found himself more comfortable than at any time in recent weeks. "It's a mess, of course," he complained. "How else would it be after listening to you?" "True. El Shaddai is merciful, but he is also just." "Godspeed, old man. After Brother Cornhor reinvents the flying machine, I'll send up some novices to drop rocks on you." They embraced affectionately. The old Jew led him to the edge of the mesa. Benjamin stood wrapped in a prayer shawl, its fine fabric contrasting oddly with the rough burlap of his loincloth, while the abbot climbed down to the trail and rode back toward the abbey. Don Paulo could still see him standing there at sundown, his spindly figure silhouetted against the twilight sky as he bowed and munched a prayer over the desert. "Memento Domine omnium famulorum tuorum," the abbot whispered in response, adding, "And may he finally win the poet's eyeball at Mumbly Peg. Amen." Let's read the next chapter because it's quite short, but give me a brief moment to drink some more tea. Okay. Chapter 17. pardon me. There's a cough coming, and I'm just like trying to wait for it to pass. Okay. Jeez. Okay, chapter 17. I can tell you definitely there will be war, said the messenger from New Rome. All Laredo's forces are committed to the plains. Mad Bear has broken camp. There's a running cavalry battle, nomad style, all over the plains. But the state of Chihuahua is threatening Laredo from the south, so Hannigan is getting ready to send Texarkana forces to the Rio Grande to help defend the frontier, with the Laredans' full approval, of course. King Garaldi is a doddering fool, said Don Paulo. Wasn't he warned against Hannigan's treachery? The messenger smiled. The Vatican diplomatic service always respects state secrets if we happen to learn them, lest we be accused of espionage. We are always careful about. Was he warned? The abbot demanded again. Of course. Giraldi said the papal legate was lying to him. He accused the church of fomenting dissension among the allies of the Holy Scourge in an attempt to promote the Pope's temporal power. The idiot even told Hannigan about the legate's warning. Dom Paulo winced and whistled. So, Hannigan did what? The messenger hesitated. I suppose I can tell you. Monsignor Apollo is under arrest. Hannigan ordered his diplomatic files seized. There's talk in New Rome of placing the whole realm of Texarkana under interdict. Of course, Hannigan has already incurred ipso facto excommunication, but that doesn't seem to bother many Texarkanans. As you surely know, the population is about 80% cultist anyhow, and the Catholicism of the ruling class has always been a thin veneer. So now Marcus, the abbot murmured sadly. And what of Thontadio? I don't quite see how he expects to get across the plains without picking up a few musketball holes just now. It seems clear why he hadn't wanted to make the trip, but I know nothing about his progress, Father Abbot. Don Paulo's frown was pained. If our refusal to send the material to his university leads to his being killed... don't trouble your conscience about that, Father Abbot. Hannigan looks out for his own. I don't know how, but I'm sure the Thon will get here. The world could ill afford to lose him, I hear. Well, but tell me, why were you sent to report Hannigan's plans to us? We're in the Empire of Denver, and I can't see how this region is affected. But I've told you only the beginning. Hannigan hopes to unite the continent eventually. After Laredo's firmly leashed, he will have broken the encirclement that's kept him in check. Then the next move will be against Denver. But wouldn't that involve supply lines across nomad country? It seems impossible. It is extremely difficult, and that's what makes the next move certain. The plains form a natural geographical barrier. If they were depopulated, Hannigan might regard his western frontier as secure as it stands, but the nomads have made it necessary for all states adjoining the plains to tie up permanent military forces around the nomad territory for containment. The only way to subdue the plains is to control both fertile strips to the east and to the west. But even so, the abbot wondered, the nomads. Hannigan's plan for them is devilish. Mad Bear's warriors can easily cope with Laredo's cavalry, but what they can't cope with is a cattle plague. The Plains tribes don't know it yet, but when Laredo set out to punish the nomads for border raiding, the Laredans drove several hundred head of diseased cattle ahead to mingle with the nomads' herds. It was Hannigan's idea. The result will be famine, and then it will be easy to set tribe against tribe. We don't, of course, know all the details, but the goal is a nomad legion under a puppet chieftain, armed by Texarkana, loyal to Hannigan, ready to sweep west to the mountains. If it comes to pass, this region will get the first breakers. But why? Surely Hannigan doesn't expect the barbarians to be dependable troops or capable of holding an empire once they finish mutilating it. No, my lord, but the nomad tribes will be disrupted, Denver will be shattered, then Hannigan can pick up the pieces. To do what with them? It couldn't be a very rich empire. No, but secure on all flanks. He might then be in a better position to strike east or northeast. Of course, before it comes to that, his plans may collapse, but whether they collapse or not, this region may well be in danger of being overrun in the not-too-distant future. Steps should be taken to secure the Abbey within the next few months. I have instructions to discuss with you the problem of keeping the memorabilia safe. Dom Paulo felt the blackness beginning to gather. After 12 centuries, a little hope had come into the world, and then came an illiterate prince to ride roughshod over it with a barbarian horde, and his fist exploded onto the desktop. We kept them outside our walls for 1,000 years, he growled, and we can keep them out for another 1,000. This abbey was under siege 3 times during the Bering influx, and once again during the Viserianist schism. We'll keep the books safe. We've kept them that way for quite some time. But there is an added hazard these days, my lord. What may that be? A bountiful supply of gunpowder and grape shot. Small page break here. The Feast of the Assumption had come and gone, but still there was no word of the party from Texarkana. Private votive masses for pilgrims and travelers were beginning to be offered by the abbey's priests. Dom Paulo had ceased taking even a light breakfast, and it was whispered that he was doing penance for having invited the scholar at all, in view of the present danger on the plains. The watchtowers remained constantly manned. The abbot himself frequently climbed the wall to peer eastward. Shortly before Vespers, on the feast of St. Bernard, a novice reported seeing a thin and distant dust trail, but darkness was coming on, and no one else had been able to make it out. Soon, Compline and the Salva Regina were sung, but still no one appeared at the gates. It might have been their advance scout, suggested Prior Galt. It might have been Brother Watchman's imagination, countered Dom Paulo. But if they've camped just 10 miles or so down the way, we'd see their fire from the tower. It's a clear night. Still, Domni, after the moon rises, we could send a rider. Oh no, that's a good way to get shot by mistake. If it's really them, they've probably kept their fingers on their triggers for the whole trip, especially at night. It can wait until dawn. It was late the following morning when the expected party of horsemen appeared out of the east. From the top of the wall, Dom Paulo blinked and squinted across the hot and dry terrain, trying to focus myopic eyes on the distance. Dust from the horses' hooves was drifting away to the north. The party had stopped for a parley. I seem to be seeing 20 or 30 of them, the abbot complained, rubbing his eyes in annoyance. Are there really so many? Approximately, said Galt. How will we ever take care of them all? I don't think we'll be taking care of the ones with the wolfskins, my lord abbot, the younger priest said stiffly. Wolfskins? Nomads, my lord. Man the walls, close the gates, let down the shield, break out the... Wait, they're not all nomads, Domni. Oh? Dom Paulo turned to peer again. The parley was being ended. Men waved, the group split in two, the larger party galloped back toward the east. The remaining horsemen watched briefly, then reined around and trotted toward the abbey. 6 or 7 of them, some in uniform, the abbot murmured as they drew closer. The Thon and his party, I'm sure. But with nomads, it's a good thing I didn't let you send a rider out last night. What were they doing with nomads? It appeared that they came as guides, Father Galt said darkly. How neighborly of the lion to lie down with the lamb. The riders approached the gates. Dom Paulo swallowed dryness. Well, we'd better go welcome them, Father, he sighed. By the time the priests had descended from the wall, the travelers had reined up just outside the courtyard. A horseman detached himself from the others, trotted forward, dismounted, and presented his papers. Don Paulo of Pecos, Abbess. The abbot bowed. Dibiadsum, welcome in the name of St. Leibowitz, Don Taddeo, welcome in the name of this abbey, in the name of 40 generations who've waited for you to come. Be at home. We serve you. The words were heartfelt. The words had been saved for many years while awaiting this moment. Hearing a muttered monosyllable in reply, Don Paulo looked up slowly. For a moment his glance locked with the scholars. He felt the warmth quickly fade, those icy eyes, cold and searching gray, skeptical, hungry, and proud. They studied him as one might study a lifeless curio. That this moment might be as a bridge across a gulf of 12 centuries, Paulo had fervently prayed. Prayed, too, that through him, the last martyred scientist of that earlier age would clasp hands with tomorrow. There was, indeed, a gulf. That much was plain. The abbot felt suddenly that he belonged not to this age at all, that he had been left stranded somewhere on a sandbar in Time's river, and that there wasn't really ever a bridge at all. Come, he said gently. Brother Visclair will attend to your horses. When he had seen the guests installed in their lodgings and had retired to the privacy of his study, the smile on the face of the wooden saint reminded him unaccountably of the smirk of old Benjamin Elazar, saying, The children of this world are consistent too. That's the end of chapter 17, and we will start tomorrow on chapter 18. Oh, man. Sorry, excuse me. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate you listening in. Whoever's listening today live, thank you. And if you're listening later on YouTube, then thanks for that too. It's nice. I appreciate it. As always, go give Aindulmedir some love on Bandcamp and Spotify and YouTube. He's really a nice guy for letting me use his tunes this way. So, yeah, show him some appreciation. All of his albums are great. I listen to him a lot when I read or write. I don't know. It's been a tough weekend with yet another ice shooting. It's been hard to focus on anything other than that, so I guess this was the first other thing I've done this weekend, and it's nice to get absorbed in something else briefly. Reach out to your neighbors and your local neighborhood. Look for a mutual aid group and join. Look for a local support group for immigrants. If you're in the greater Boston area, we have one called Loose that I work with. If you have any questions about them, you can reach out and I can get you in touch. We work with a hotline that reports sightings of ice, and then they call verifiers, which is what I am, to go out and take a look and approach, and if necessary, ask questions and confront and find out if it's ice, and then report back so that we can alert the neighborhood and tell people to stay safe. And, generally stand around and take pictures of the ice vehicle until they get uncomfortable and go away, because they're cowards, and that's what they do. They are cowards. They are weak individuals with no principles, no integrity, and very poor training, as evidenced by the fact that they'll just execution-style shoot people on the street. They're bastards. They're bad people. They're fucks. Do what you can. It probably feels helpless. You probably feel helpless right now, but it matters a lot more than you might think, just to talk to your neighbors and to show support and to remind people that you're present. We're gonna, I don't know, if you look at Minnesota, they're in an era where their neighborhood matters and their allies are their neighbors, and they're doing decentralized organization, and it's incredible. And that's what everyone's gonna have to do. So start reaching out to folks who live next door to you that you've never talked to before. Help them shovel their driveway, bake them cookies. I don't know. Do whatever you got to do. But anyway, keep going. and we'll catch up on Monday. Take it easy.